My wife cheated on me after 12 years and asked for $5 million. It did not end how she expected. The envelope that smiled back. I used to think 12 years meant something, like a warranty stamped into the calendar. I am a very wealthy man. And yes, that changes how people look at you, but it never changed what I wanted at home. I wanted calm mornings, school drop-offs, weekend pancakes, and the kind of marriage where you do not keep score. My wife Elise and I built that life on paper and in public. 2 kids, Noah and Mia. A house that always smelled like coffee and crayons, and a schedule that made everything feel safe, until it did not. The first crack was not dramatic, not a lipstick mark or a loud fight. It was a rhythm problem. Like our home started playing half a beat late. Elise began holding her phone like it was fragile and priceless. She angled the screen away. She stepped into hallways to take calls. And when she returned, she wore a smile that looked pinned on instead of lived in. I asked her one evening, light and casual, everything good? She said, of course, then kissed my cheek and asked if I had confirmed the kids' dentist appointments, which was her favorite way to redirect. Very domestic, very effective. Then the envelope arrived on a Tuesday. Our housekeeper placed it on the entry table with the other mail. It was thick paper, expensive, no logo, no return address, just my name written neatly like the sender wanted me to feel known. I picked it up and it felt heavier than paper should feel, not physically, emotionally, like it carried a message that would not fit inside it. I did not open it right away. Timing matters. I set it down and went to the kitchen. Elise was pouring juice for Mia. Noah was arguing about wearing his hoodie even though it was warm. Elise laughed and said, "You are going to melt." Noah said, "I never melt." And for a second the world looked normal again. Then Elise noticed the envelope. Her eyes flicked to it like it was a bee in the room, quick and instinctive. She smoothed her face and said, "What is that?" Her tone tried to be casual, but her fingers tightened around the glass. "Just mail," I said. "From who?" she asked, a half note higher. "Not enough for the kids to notice. Enough for me." "No idea," I said, and I slid it into my briefcase. Elise watched the movement too closely, then turned back to Mia and started talking about an art project like she was reading a script. All day the envelope sat in my bag, and I felt it in the room with me even while it was zipped shut. I nodded through meetings, signed documents, smiled at people who thought they knew me, and in the back of my mind the envelope kept tapping. Open it, open it, open it. I waited until late, after homework, after baths, after the kids were asleep. Elise was in the bedroom with the door closed, supposedly folding laundry, which would have been believable if I had not heard her whispering on the phone earlier. I sat in my office alone and opened the envelope. Inside was a single sheet and a small flash drive. The sheet had one sentence: "You deserve to know who you are sharing your life with." No signature, no explanation, just that, like the paper itself was judging me gently. I felt irritation first. I hate anonymous games. In business, people either sign their names or they stay quiet. But then my reflection in the dark monitor looked like a man about to discover something that would not be put back neatly. I plugged the flash drive into my computer. A folder opened with photos, clear and deliberate. Elise in a restaurant booth. Elise leaning close to a man I did not recognize. Elise stepping out of a car laughing with her hand on his arm. Then a short video clip. Nothing graphic, nothing explicit, just enough to remove doubt. Enough to make my stomach drop like an elevator that forgot the building. I sat very still because shock turns you into furniture. I played it again because my brain wanted to double-check reality like a bad connection. Then I heard footsteps in the hallway, soft and cautious, Elise moving like she already knew what I was doing. She paused outside the door, and the whole house felt like it was holding its breath. I minimized the folder, not to hide it, but to buy myself one more second to decide what kind of man I was going to be next. The door opened a few inches. Elise peered in and smiled. The same smile that used to calm storms. Only now it looked like an apology wearing makeup. "Hey," she said, "you still up?" I looked at her and felt something click into place. Not rage, not tears, clarity, sharp and clean. "Yeah," I said, "I am still up. And Elise, we need to talk." She stepped inside and I noticed her phone in her hand with the screen down like a little shield, like she was ready to run if the truth moved too fast. I turned the monitor slightly so she could see the folder name from the flash drive, and I watched her face lose color. Her smile did not vanish. It froze, then cracked, and in that silence I realized the envelope was not the beginning. It was just the moment the curtain opened. Because Elise did not look surprised that I knew. She looked surprised that I knew tonight. The calm before the question. Elise stood there like time had politely stepped aside for her. Her face carefully neutral, her shoulders relaxed a second too late, which told me everything I needed to know. People who are innocent react fast. People who are guilty manage reactions. She looked at the screen, then at me, then back at the screen again, as if the order might change the outcome. You went through my things, she said finally, not angry, not scared, just testing the temperature of the room. No, I said. Someone else did. And they thought I deserved the truth. That word truth hung between us like an object you could trip over. Elise let out a slow breath and leaned against the desk, folding her arms. A familiar move, one she used during negotiations with contractors or teachers, or anyone she thought needed to be guided gently to her conclusion. This is not what it looks like, she said, and I almost laughed, not because it was funny, but because it was predictable. 12 years. And she still thought I had never heard that sentence before. I did not raise my voice. I did not ask questions yet. I simply waited. Silence is an underrated tool, especially when the other person is carrying too many words inside them. She filled it quickly. It was complicated, she said. It started months ago. She felt lonely. She felt unseen. She felt like my world was too big and she was shrinking inside it. I nodded, not in agreement, but in acknowledgement. People deserve to finish their excuses, even when they are standing on them. I asked one question. Are you in love with him? She hesitated, and hesitation is louder than answers. She said she did not know, which is usually code for yes, but I am afraid to say it out loud. I leaned back in my chair and folded my hands, still calm, still measured, because somewhere in my chest a strange clarity had settled, like a system reboot. Elise started crying then. Not dramatic sobs, controlled tears, the kind that aim for sympathy. Without losing dignity, she said she never meant to hurt me. She said it just happened. She said she was planning to tell me eventually. Eventually is a fascinating word. It lives somewhere between never and too late. I asked another question. How long? She said almost a year, and something in me clicked again, not broken, recalibrated. A year is not a mistake. A year is a decision repeated many times. I stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the city lights, my city, the one I built. A large part of. Elise followed me with her eyes like she was watching a verdict being written. What do you want to do? She asked softly. And there it was, the moment she expected anger, shouting, threats. Instead, I turned to her and said, we are not having this conversation right now. Her eyebrows pulled together, confused. What do you mean? I mean the kids are asleep, and tomorrow they wake up to the same parents they went to bed with. I said, whatever else happens, we do not turn their world into collateral damage. She nodded quickly, relief washing over her face, misreading my calm as weakness. She reached for my arm and I stepped back, not dramatically, just enough to reset the space. I said we will talk tomorrow, with lawyers involved. Her face changed at that word. Lawyers, she repeated, as if the idea offended her personally. Yes, I said, because clarity is expensive but confusion costs more. She went quiet, then defensive, then cold. She said she deserved security. She said she had given me 12 years. She said she sacrificed her own ambitions for my success. I listened without interrupting. And when she finished, I said something that surprised both of us. I said, you are right. You did give 12 years, and that matters. But it does not buy immunity from consequences. The room felt smaller after that. Elise straightened up and her tone sharpened. She said we would discuss numbers, fair numbers. She said she was not leaving empty-handed. I asked her to repeat that. She did, slower this time, more deliberate. She wanted $5 million, just like that, like she was quoting a menu price. I felt a flicker of amusement, not because it was funny, but because it was bold, audacious even. I told her we would see what the law says. She smiled then, not warmly, confidently, and said the law is flexible when people like you want peace. I walked past her toward the door and said, peace is not something you buy by rewarding betrayal. She stayed in the office while I went to the guest room, and as I lay there staring at the ceiling, I realized the envelope had not just exposed her affair, it had triggered something else entirely, a negotiation she thought she could win, and she had no idea yet that I had already decided something important. I was not going to fight emotionally. I was going to win strategically. The morning after confidence. The next morning arrived with the audacity of normalcy, sunlight through the windows, the smell of coffee, the sound of a house pretending nothing had cracked. Elise acted efficient and composed, packing lunches, reminding Noah about his science project, brushing Mia hair with gentle strokes. If someone had walked in, they would have seen a functional family. What they would not have seen was the tension moving through the air like static, waiting for contact. The kids left for school, and the front door closed behind them. And suddenly the house felt too large. Elise turned to me and said we should sit, her tone professional now, like we were partners dissolving a company, not a marriage. I nodded and we sat at the kitchen table where we had celebrated birthdays and small victories. She wasted no time. She said she had spoken to someone, a friend, not a lawyer yet, but someone knowledgeable. That word knowledgeable made me smile internally. She said the $5 million was reasonable. that it would make things smooth, quiet, respectful. She emphasized respectful like it was a shared goal. I asked her a simple question, why 5? She paused, then said because it reflected our lifestyle, our shared history, and her future needs. I nodded again, still calm, and said, and what about trust? She looked at me like I had switched languages. Trust does not have a price tag, she said. Exactly, I replied, which is why this conversation is already flawed. Elise leaned back and crossed her arms. She said I was being dramatic, that affairs happen, that people move on, that I should be grateful she was being straightforward. That word again, straightforward, as if betrayal delivered neatly becomes honesty. I told her I had already contacted my attorney. Her confidence wavered for half a second. Then she recovered. She said, good. Transparency helps. I agreed. Transparency does help, which is why I had also contacted a private firm to audit our shared financial history. Her eyes narrowed. Why? She asked. Because clarity is fair to everyone, I said, including you. The silence stretched. Elise finally asked what I wanted, not demanded, asked, and that told me something important. Her confidence was cracking. I said I wanted a process, not a payout. I wanted the truth fully documented, timelines, communications, financial overlap, everything. She laughed sharply and said I was overreacting. I said no. I am preparing. She stood up then and paced. She accused me of trying to punish her, of using my resources to intimidate her. I reminded her she was the one who named a price, and that prices invite evaluation. She stopped pacing and looked at me with a new expression, calculation. She said people would side with her, that I was powerful and distant and married to my work, that narratives matter. I smiled then, the first real smile since the envelope arrived, and said you are right. Narratives matter, which is why I have been very careful about mine. She asked what I meant, and I said nothing yet, because some advantages work better when they arrive quietly. Elise went quiet, then asked if I was threatening her. I said no. I am informing you. She grabbed her bag and said she was going out. I told her to be back before the kids returned, not as an order, as a boundary. She hesitated, then nodded and left. The house fell silent again, and I finally allowed myself a long breath, not relief, resolve. My phone buzzed. A message from my attorney confirming a meeting that afternoon. Another from the firm I hired saying preliminary findings were already interesting. That word interesting carried weight. I looked around the kitchen, at the chairs, the table, the life that had been carefully curated and casually endangered, and I felt something solid settle in me. Elise thought this was about money. She thought 5 million could close a chapter cleanly. What she did not understand yet was that this story was no longer about what she wanted. It was about what the truth would inevitably demand. And the truth, unlike negotiations, does not bend just because someone feels entitled when quiet becomes loud. By the end of that week, the calm Elise was performing started to feel rehearsed in a way even she could not fully control. She smiled too quickly in front of the kids. She cleaned things that were already clean. She talked too much about schedules and plans. The future framed like a checklist she could still manage. Meanwhile, I moved differently, slower on the outside, faster underneath. Meetings with attorneys, calls with advisors, quiet reviews of timelines that no longer felt abstract. The private firm sent me a secure file late one evening. No commentary, just data, dates, locations, overlapping expenses, things that do not lie because they cannot feel. I did not open it right away, not because I was afraid, but because I wanted to be deliberate. Wealth teaches you patience the hard way. Rush costs more than waiting. Elise noticed my restraint and misread it again. She assumed silence meant uncertainty, and uncertainty meant leverage. One night after the kids were asleep, she poured herself a glass of wine and sat across from me. She said she had been thinking. Always a warning phrase. She said 5 million might be flexible, maybe 4.5 if we kept things amicable. She said amicable like a reward she was offering. I asked her if she was worried. She laughed and said no, just realistic. I nodded and said realism is good, especially when it arrives before consequences. Her smile tightened. She asked what I was implying. I said nothing yet, which was true and strategic. The next day the kids' school called, not with a problem, with concern. Elise had missed a scheduled meeting and was unreachable for hours. When she finally returned home, she was irritated, defensive. She accused the school of overreacting, accused me of not covering for her. That was new. Blame misfiring in random directions. I told her calmly that consistency mattered now more than ever. She snapped back that I was not her supervisor. I agreed and said no, but I am their father. That ended the argument quickly. 2 days later, my attorney confirmed something Elise did not know yet. The man from the photos was not just a passing presence. He was connected financially, not directly to me, but to a subsidiary Elise had limited access to years ago, and no legitimate reason to revisit. Small transfers, spaced out, quiet. The kind people assume no one notices, except systems always notice. People just forget that. I did not confront her immediately. Timing matters. Instead, I watched how she checked her phone, how she flinched when my laptop was open, how she asked casual questions about my schedule that were not casual at all. The house felt like a chessboard mid-game, every move revealing intent. Then came the dinner. Her parents invited us over, something they rarely did without notice. Elise encouraged it, insisted actually, said it would be good for everyone. Family grounding. I agreed, because controlled environments reveal more than confrontations. Her parents greeted us warmly, confused but polite. They had no idea yet, at least not fully. Halfway through dinner, Elise mentioned separation, lightly, like an idea still forming. Her mother froze. Her father set his fork down slowly. I said nothing. I let Elise speak. She explained that we were growing apart, that life evolves, that sometimes people choose new paths. She avoided details with impressive agility. Her mother asked if there was someone else. Elise hesitated, just a second too long, and that was enough. I cleared my throat and said I think honesty is kinder at this point. Elise shot me a look sharp enough to cut glass. I continued calmly. There has been an ongoing relationship outside our marriage. The room went silent, not dramatic, heavy. Her father looked at Elise, not angry, disappointed, which is always worse. Her mother asked if it was true. Elise nodded slowly, tears appearing on cue. Explanations followed. Loneliness, pressure, feeling invisible. I did not interrupt. When she finished, her father looked at me and said, I am sorry, not for her. For me, that was the moment everything shifted, because Elise realized something she had not planned for. The narrative was not leaning her way, not even gently. The drive home was quiet. She stared out the window, hands clenched. I focused on the road. Later that night, she confronted me, accused me of ambushing her, of turning her parents against her. I said, you introduced the topic. I introduced the truth. She asked if I enjoyed humiliating her. I said no, but I refused to lie to protect a version of events that never existed. She called me calculating, cold. I smiled faintly and said no, just prepared. She stormed out of the room and slammed the door, and for the first time since this began, I felt something close to certainty. Elise thought this was still a negotiation, but the board had tilted, quietly, decisively, and she was starting to sense it. The weight of witnesses. The shift after that dinner was subtle but permanent. Elise stopped pretending confidence and started testing limits. She asked sharper questions, demanded timelines, wanted reassurance disguised as logistics. I answered calmly and selectively, because information given too early loses value. The firm I hired finalized their report, and what stood out was not drama but pattern. Choices repeated quietly, resources touched without permission, trust treated like something elastic. I shared the report only with my attorney and one advisor. Both reacted the same way, not shocked, just focused, which told me everything. Meanwhile, Elise grew restless. She began mentioning the $5 million again, but now with urgency, like a deadline she felt but could not see. She said the kids needed stability, that dragging things out would hurt them. I agreed completely, which confused her, because she expected resistance, not alignment. I told her stability comes from truth, not speed. That slowed her down. Then something unexpected happened. The school counselor asked to meet with both of us. Apparently Noah had mentioned tension at home. Nothing alarming, just perceptive. Elise panicked quietly, worried about appearances. I welcomed the meeting, because clarity does not fear neutral rooms. During the session, Elise spoke carefully, framing things as mutual distance, shared challenges. When it was my turn, I said we were restructuring our family responsibly and prioritizing consistency for the kids. The counselor nodded approvingly. Elise noticed. Afterward in the car, she accused me of controlling the narrative again. I said no, I am just not hiding from it. That night, she finally asked the question she had been circling for days. What do you actually want? I said I want fairness, transparency, and a future where the kids respect both of us. She scoffed and said that sounded expensive. I smiled and said dishonesty is more expensive. She looked at me then with something close to fear, because she realized I was not bluffing, not rushing, not emotional, just moving forward with patience, and patience when paired with resources becomes momentum. She asked if I would ruin her. I said no, but I will not protect you from the consequences of your own decisions. She went quiet. The next morning, her attorney called mine asking for a revised proposal. No number mentioned, just structure, process, oversight. When I heard that, I knew the balance had shifted again, not loudly, not publicly, but enough. Elise still thought she could manage the outcome, but now she understood she was no longer directing it. And that understanding weighed on her more than any accusation ever could. The number that disappeared. Negotiations began without theatrics. No raised voices, no dramatic ultimatums, just documents, timelines, and professionals who spoke calmly while dismantling assumptions. Elise arrived to the first mediation prepared, confident in posture but brittle underneath. Her attorney outlined a proposal focused on support and transition. Noticeably absent was the 5 million figure. I almost admired the adjustment. Adaptability is a skill even when used too late. My attorney responded with questions, not counteroffers. Questions about access, about intent, about overlaps. Each one precise. Each one narrowing the space Elise thought she still had. She shifted in her chair, interrupted once, then stopped, realizing interruptions only draw attention to discomfort. During a break, she pulled me aside and whispered that this was getting out of hand, that I was making her look unstable. I said no. The process is doing that. She asked if I hated her. I said no. Hatred would mean I am still emotionally invested in punishing you. This is just resolution. That answer landed harder than anger would have. When mediation resumed, her attorney suggested a settlement based on guidelines. Again, no large lump sum, just structure and accountability. Elise stared at the table, silent. Later in the hallway, she asked where the 5 million went. I said it was never real. It was a number you used to feel safe, not one supported by reality. She accused me of stripping her of dignity. I said dignity survives truth. Entitlement does not. The final sessions moved quickly after that. Terms solidified, parenting plans approved, finances aligned with facts, not feelings. When the agreement was signed, Elise did not cry. She looked relieved and embarrassed at the same time. A strange combination. She said quietly that she never thought it would end like this. I said endings reflect the choices that built them, not the wishes that arrived too late. Moving day came without drama. The kids hugged her, promised to call, asked when she would visit. She smiled and told them soon. Her car pulled away and the house felt different, not empty, honest. That night I sat alone and realized something important. I had not won by taking something from her. I had won by refusing to lose myself. The 5 million had vanished because it was never about money. It was about control, and once control is replaced by clarity, inflated numbers have nowhere left to stand. The quiet after the storm. Life did not reset overnight. It rarely does, but it stabilized in ways that matter. Mornings became predictable again, not perfect, just honest. The kids adjusted faster than anyone expected. Children sense relief even when adults hide it. Elise visited on schedule, polite, careful, no longer negotiating. Every interaction, the tension had drained out of her voice, replaced by something humbler. Time passed, and the story spread quietly through family and friends, not with drama, but with consistency. People noticed who stayed steady, who did not rewrite events to look better, who never asked for sides yet somehow received them. Elise never demanded the 5 million again. The number became almost mythical, something that once existed in her imagination and then dissolved under light. One afternoon months later, she said something unexpected. She thanked me, not for the outcome, but for not destroying her. I told her I never intended to. I just refused to destroy myself to make things easier. She nodded, understanding finally catching up to events. I learned something valuable through all of this. Wealth does not protect you from betrayal, but clarity protects you from chaos. Dignity is not loud. It does not argue. It waits and then walks forward when the path clears. I did not lose a wife. I lost an illusion. And that trade turned out to be profitable in ways no settlement could measure. The house is quieter now, but it is real. And when I look at my kids laughing at the kitchen table, I know the story did not end with loss. It ended with alignment, with a man who remembered his worth and chose strategy over bitterness, truth over comfort, and peace over paying a price that was never justified.